morning, everyone. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Tuesday, May 19th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. And before we get to it, these are the stories we're following at this hour. The World Health Organization buckles to calls for a comprehensive evaluation of how it managed the global COVID-19 pandemic as the U.S. feuds with China during the agency's first virtual World Health Summit. Encouraging signs regarding a possible COVID-19 vaccine. A human testing trial by the U.S. biotech firm shows promising early results. Researchers say it appears to be safe and able to stimulate an immune response against the virus. Plus, Emirates is considering laying off 30,000 people as airlines forecast a prolonged recession for the tourism sector because of COVID-19. And ride-hailing giant Uber, too, is shedding 3,000 more jobs and shutting 45 offices around the world. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has sharply criticized some countries for ignoring the advice of the World Health Organization during the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking at the World Health Assembly on Monday, he urged all countries to pull in the same direction to fight and hopefully one day overcome the virus. But the U.S. and China also clashed over who's to blame for the deadly pandemic. Our Lee Seung-jae starting us off.
With the 73rd World Health Assembly taking place virtually for the first time in its history on Monday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres slammed some countries for brushing off the WHO's advice during the global COVID-19 pandemic. He insisted the pandemic should serve as a wake-up call to a world which needs to be more united in its response.
COVID-19 must be a wake-up call. It is time for an end of this hubris. Our deep feelings of powerlessness must lead to greater humility. Deadly global threats require a new unity and solidarity.
The UN chief also reiterated the need to support the WHO, which he described as irreplaceable.
The WHO is irreplaceable. It needs enhanced resources, particularly to provide support to developing countries, which must be our greatest concern. We are as strong as the weakest health systems.
Despite the call for unity, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar slammed China for its lack of transparency in regards to the outbreak, stressing that Beijing's actions cost the lives of many people around the world. The criticism was made indirectly, but it was clear which country Azar was referencing.
In an apparent attempt to conceal this outbreak, at least one member state made a mockery of their transparency obligations, with tremendous cost for the entire world.
He also heaped the blame on the WHO for the agency's lack of information sharing and transparency, calling it intolerable. Azar demanded changes be made at the WHO, accusing it of failing to obtain the information the world needed as the outbreak started to filter out. Despite the verbal attack on China and the WHO, Chinese President Xi Jinping defended Beijing's handling of the pandemic.
All along, China has acted with openness, transparency, and responsibility. We have provided the information to WHO and relevant countries in the most timely fashion. We have done everything in our power to support and assist countries in need.
President Xi said China will provide $2 billion of international assistance within 2 years to help with the COVID-19 response. In addition, he vowed that vaccine development and deployment in China, when complete, will be made available for the public good, both inside and outside China. He added that any COVID-19 vaccine developed by China would be accessible and affordable for developing nations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And staying with that story, a U.S.-based biotech company says the first human testing phase of the potential COVID-19 vaccine appears to be safe and is able to stimulate an immune response against the virus. On top of that, more than 100 institutes dotted around the world are also working on their own vaccines. Our Choi Jung-yun reports.
U.S. biotech company Moderna says there have been some promising early results from its first human test for a potential vaccine for COVID-19. According to Moderna, the vaccine produced virus-fighting antibodies in all 45 participants. Healthy volunteers between the ages of 18 to 55 were separated into 3 groups, and each received a 25, 100, or 250 microgram dose of the potential vaccine. The results show the levels of antibodies in the participants were similar or greater than those in patients who had recovered from the virus. The vaccine also produced neutralizing antibodies in at least 8 participants, which is considered important in acquiring protection.
Our anticipation is that it will be in the millions by the end of this year. Could be as high as 1 billion doses in 2021.
Approved by the U.S. FDA last month, Moderna will proceed with the second phase involving 600 people. And it expects a third to begin in July if the second phase goes well. It's said that if the vaccine is found to be effective and safe, it could be ready for commercial use in early 2021. Other biotech firms around the world have also started human safety trials. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, 8 companies are developing a vaccine based on a new technology. This includes Pfizer's trial involving 360 volunteers across the U.S., and the first subjects have already been injected with a dose. Britain's AstraZeneca will also produce 30 million vaccine doses in the U.K. by September. Biotech companies in South Korea are also accelerating their vaccine and treatment development. A consortium comprised of vaccine research institutes and medicine manufacturing companies has announced it has completed making the technical ingredients for a clinical phase 1 trial of the drug. 최정윤, Arirang News.
Emirates, one of the world's biggest airlines, is considering whether to cut 30,000 jobs, or roughly a third of its workforce, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, describing it as the deepest cut in the global airline industry caused by the pandemic. Bloomberg said Monday that Emirates' decision is aimed at preparing the company for a possible prolonged recession in the tourism sector. Back in April, British Airways also said it would cut up to 12,000 jobs, and 4 major airlines in the U.S. have already asked over 100,000 employees to go on voluntary short-term leave or to take early retirement. The American ride-hailing company Uber says it'll be cutting 3,000 more jobs because of the COVID-19 pandemic, less than 2 weeks after its initial round of layoffs. In an email to its employees on Monday, Uber's CEO said the company will also be shutting or consolidating 45 of its offices around the world. Uber's latest round of cuts come after it announced earlier this month that it will be laying off 3,700 employees, or 14% of its workforce. A UN agency is warning 180 million people in developed countries, underdeveloped countries that is, including North Korea, could experience chronic food shortages due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a report published on Monday, the Food and Agricultural Organization said it would help 30 underdeveloped countries such as Myanmar, the Philippines, and North Korea cope with food shortages. It also said that it would need to budget around $350 million for the remainder of this year, 3 times more than the UN agency said it needed in April. It also added that they need ways to work around closed borders to provide food aid. Ending the months-long shutdown prompted by the COVID-19 outbreak across the globe, schools in South Korea will start to gradually open from tomorrow, which is Wednesday. And Seoul's education office, rolling out its guidelines for schools in the capital, said that while high school seniors will return to classrooms tomorrow, other high school grades, elementary and middle school students will alternate between online and offline sessions. Our Kim Hyo-san with the details.
As South Korea plans to go ahead with its decision to reopen schools gradually starting with high school seniors Wednesday, the superintendent of Seoul's education office announced on Monday detailed guidelines for schools in the capital. Cho Hee-yeon explained the decision comes as the country witnesses a slowdown in new COVID-19 infections. Cho stressed that diverse options are being discussed to minimize the risk of infection, on top of basic quarantine protocols, including checking body temperature, regular ventilation, and disinfection of frequently touched surfaces.
In line with social distancing, various options will be available to schools, including holding classes bi-weekly, carrying out flexible class hours, and remote classes.
He explained that high school seniors will have to go to school every day. Students in other grades are required to attend offline classes at least once a week. As for Seoul, he says schools can decide to open depending on their own discretion. In the phased reopening plan, high school seniors will return to school on Wednesday, and younger students will follow gradually until June 8th. For example, second-year high school students will start going to school from May 27th, while first-year high school students will do so from June 3rd. Cho added that if the COVID-19 situation worsens again, schools will return to online classes. He also called on the Education Ministry to be open to the possibility of delaying the National College entrance exam by a month or so if the situation worsens. The exam, originally scheduled for November 19th, has been delayed by 2 weeks to December 3rd. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
With the global coronavirus pandemic showing no sign of abating anytime soon, more global sporting events are making changes to their schedules. The USGA has scrapped qualifying for all of its remaining championships this year, including qualification rounds for the US Open. Now that leaves only 4 of the 14 championships this year. And the US Open, which had already been postponed from June to September, will, for the first time in 96 years, only feature golfers exempt from having to qualify. But slightly a different story in tennis. World Team Tennis says it'll be still on track to open its 3-week season this July. The head of WTT says it is hoping to select a site this week, with currently 4 cities in Texas and Florida in the mix. Now, this past Monday marked the 40th anniversary of the South Korea's May 18th Democratic Movement, and we had the opportunity to speak with a former U.S. Peace Corps volunteer to hear an eyewitness account of the events of May in 1980. Our Choi Won-jo reports.
Dr. David Dollinger came to South Korea as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in 1978. He was in Gwangju in 1980, where he witnessed the democratic movement firsthand. Dr. Dollinger still remembers the day of May 21st when he saw the helicopter above his head.
I stood there and was looking for the helicopter, trying to figure out what was going on, when I was actually grabbed by Koreans and dragged inside a store where they said, "Don't stand out there, they could shoot you."
However, this was not the only thing that he witnessed in Gwangju.
In the emergency room, we actually saw x-rays that showed bullets penetrating on one person's upper left shoulder, and the exit wound was down by their right hip. So they had to have been shot from above.
Many years have gone by, but the collective spirit of Gwangju was what still stays with him until now.
We cannot allow the military to do this to us. We have to fight back. That is the spirit that I remember of Gwangju.
People in Gwangju told him the fight was not for themselves, but for something greater.
And they all said one thing: we're doing this for the future. That was what they were thinking about.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in said during the commemorative event on Monday that the truth can open the path towards forgiveness and reconciliation. South Korea launched the investigation committee earlier this year to find out who was responsible for the brutal orders given in May 1980. Choi Won-jong, Arirang News.
Good morning. It will continue to be wet with on and off heavy showers and occasional thunderstorms. And since yesterday, mountainous regions and other areas in Gangwon-do Province have received 100 to 150 millimeters of downpours. But up to 150 millimeters more rain is in the forecast with a heavy rain warning in place. There could be flooding as well, so be careful if you're in that part of the country. In fact, Gangwon-do Province will see rain into Thursday, while the rest of us will see showers letting up by tonight. And temperatures will be breezy. Highs will be nearly 10 degrees Celsius lower than yesterday in Seoul. It will only get up to 16 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And for other regions, Busan will reach 20 degrees, Daegu and Jeju getting up to 21 degrees Celsius this afternoon, while Jeju will be dry. Readings will remain lower than the season norms for the next few days, and we're forecast to see more rain on Friday and Saturday. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that does it for this edition of Arirang News. As always, thanks for watching.